Hello and welcome to Natasha's Creations. People have been telling stories since the dawn of language, and over the millennia, that ability and that love of storytelling became more and more immersive. Stories became poems and music and theater, film, TV shows. This video is all about the history of theater. This topic could be an entire series, and I might do that at some point, but for now I'm breaking this up into two parts. So without further ado, here is part one, the history of Western theater. In the Western world, people usually think of ancient Greece as the birthplace of theater, but the first written drama was actually performed in ancient Egypt in about 2500 BCE. This Abydos Passion play was a religious ritual performance that depicted the slaying of Osiris and his followers by his brother Seth. These theatrical enactments of myths were very popular in ancient Egypt. They were usually performed at festivals, and carvings depicting masked dancers putting on these plays have been found dating back to 3500 BCE. Theater evolved from a religious ritual to an art form in ancient Greece in about the 6th century BCE. The first plays were performed at festivals honoring the Greek god Dionysus. They started out as music and dance performances, but the priest Thespis added dialogue to his performance, essentially becoming the first actor. This is where the word thespian for an actor comes from. He's also credited with creating the tragedy, which actually means goat song, for the goats that were sacrificed at these festivals. Other poets and playwrights followed suit, and these festivals soon started including contests for the best tragedy. The history of comedies is a little bit harder to trace, but an annual comedy competition was held in Athens starting in 486 BCE. Comedies were satirical and often mocked men in power, but sometimes ordinary people as well. A third genre of play was the satyr play, which was a comedy drama. These plays are performed in between tragedies and usually made fun of the characters in those tragedies. The Greeks also created the theatron, which was a large, round, open-air structure built into the side of a hill. These structures consisted of the orchestra where the play was held, the skene, or the backstage area, and the audience where the audience sat. Theater really flourished in ancient Rome and became more diverse. There were festival plays and there was street theater, and performances evolved to include acrobatics and miming. Comedies and tragedies also became more elaborate. Dramas were divided into episodes, and a musical accompaniment was added to the dialogue, so it was kind of like a modern musical. By the 2nd century BCE, a guild of drama writers had been established. Unlike Greek theater, Roman theater allowed for female actors, many of whom became very famous for their work and established their own wealthy acting guilds. During the early Middle Ages, churches began dramatizing biblical stories on certain holy days. These developed into liturgical dramas or miracle plays. The Middle Ages were a dark time. Morality plays dealt with death and vices and the struggle between good and evil. During the Renaissance, theater buildings were built and the old Greek, Roman, and medieval plays were revamped for a new audience. In Italy in the 16th century, a new genre called the pastoral was developed, which was very popular among the noble class. It romanticized classical plays and themes and put them in fantasy settings populated by things like nymphs and magicians and satyrs. Think A Midsummer Night's Dream. During the Spanish Golden Age, Spain produced the most amount and variety of plays in the whole world. Lope de Vega was actually considered the Shakespeare of Spain. In England, the Globe Theatre allowed for more intimacy between the audience and the actors, and allowed the writers and the actors to be more imaginative. England also had William Shakespeare, considered the greatest playwright of all time. The first play written by an American was Thomas Godfrey's neoclassical tragedy, The Prince of Parthia, written in 1767. Before that, Puritans in North America didn't allow for any theater. There were lots of legislatures in New England that tried to completely prohibit any kind of theatrical performance. Luckily, by the 18th century, professional theater was well established in the United States. In the beginning of the 20th century, theater was very heavily dominated by commercialism. To combat that, a lot of amateur little theaters were established. These theaters could be experimental, and the little theater movement eventually developed into community theater. Broadway, the theater district of New York, was first established in 1735. In the 20th century, Broadway was largely associated with the development of the American musical. Hollywood and film threatened Broadway and theater in the early 20th century, but luckily, the art of theater not only survived, but thrived. The history of Western theater is almost as long and complicated as the history of the Western world itself. But I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. Please like and subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And stay tuned for part 2, History of Eastern Theater.